Hey, old man, why don't you show these kids what real martial arts look like? I promise I'll go easy on you.
Son, I'm here to work, not to play.
Black belt asked a black janitor, veteran to spar for fun. What happened next? Left everyone speechless. The mop hit the floor with a wet slap as Staff Sergeant Rhett. James Washington watched the black belt instructor humiliate another student. Derek Mitchell's ego filled the Iron Dragon MMA gym like toxic smoke, his third-degree black belt draped around his shoulders like a crown of arrogance. But when Derek's eyes landed on the quiet janitor mopping in the corner, his smirk widened with predatory interest. "Hey, old man," Derek called out loud enough for the entire class to hear. "How about you show these kids what real martial arts looks like? I'll go easy on you." The students snickered, unaware they were witnessing the setup for the most devastating lesson in the gym's history. What happened next would prove that some warriors hang up their uniforms, but never surrender their skills, and that the most dangerous opponents often hide in plain sight, carrying mops instead of medals. The Iron Dragon MMA gym squatted in downtown Phoenix like a fortress of sweat and ambition, where wannabe fighters paid premium prices to train under instructors who'd never tasted real combat. The facility boasted state-of-the-art equipment, motivational posters featuring famous fighters, and an atmosphere thick with testosterone and delusion. Derek Mitchell ruled this kingdom with the absolute authority of someone who'd never faced a genuine challenge to his perceived dominance. At 32, Derek embodied everything wrong with modern martial arts culture. His third-degree black belt had been earned through politics and payment rather than prowess, his techniques polished in competitions where points mattered more than effectiveness. He'd built his reputation on beating amateur students and intimidating newcomers, his confidence rooted in carefully selected opponents who posed no real threat to his carefully constructed image. Derek's teaching method relied on public humiliation disguised as instruction. He would select students for demonstration matches that were actually opportunities to showcase his supposed superiority, breaking down their confidence while building his own legend. The gym's culture encouraged this behavior, with students mistaking cruelty for toughness and arrogance for expertise. James Washington represented everything Derek despised and feared: quiet competence that needed no announcement, strength that required no demonstration, and a presence that commanded respect without demanding attention. At 45, the former staff sergeant carried himself with the understated confidence of someone who'd proven his worth in places where failure meant death rather than embarrassment. James's military service had included 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 75th Ranger Regiment, where he'd earned 2 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart before an IED blast ended his active duty career. But what the gym's occupants couldn't see was his previous life as Lightning Washington, 5-time world mixed martial arts champion, holder of records in 3 weight classes, and the most feared striker in the sport's history, before a training accident had shattered his left knee and his championship dreams. The transition from champion fighter to disabled veteran to night shift janitor had been brutal, but necessary. James's medical discharge had come with a pension that covered basic needs, but not the expensive treatments his wife needed for her battle with cancer. The janitor job at Iron Dragon provided health insurance and flexible hours that allowed him to care for her during the day while working nights to make ends meet. The gym's overnight shift suited James's temperament and circumstances perfectly. He could work alone, avoid the chaos of regular training hours, and maintain the anonymity that his pride demanded. Watching privileged students play at fighting while he cleaned up their sweat was humbling, but it was honest work that served his family's needs. James's knowledge of the gym's culture came from months of invisible observation. He'd watched Derek's bullying, seen talented students driven away by unnecessary humiliation, and witnessed the toxic atmosphere that prioritized ego over education. His military training in leadership and his championship experience in coaching made Derek's methods particularly painful to observe. The physical differences between the two men were subtle but significant. Derek's physique was impressive, but cosmetic muscles built for appearance rather than function flexibility, developed for demonstration rather than combat effectiveness. James appeared smaller and older, his frame lean rather than bulky, his movements economical rather than flashy. But beneath his janitor's uniform lay the body of a professional fighter, maintained through military discipline and veteran determination. The confrontation that was building would test more than fighting skills. It would examine the difference between martial arts as sport and combat as survival, between techniques learned in safety and skills forged in warfare, between the confidence of the untested and the quiet certainty of the proven. The setup began with Derek's signature move, public humiliation disguised as playful invitation. He'd just finished demonstrating a submission hold on a nervous white belt, leaving the student gasping and embarrassed while the class watched in uncomfortable silence. The aftermath always followed the same pattern. Derek would bask in the artificial victory while scanning for his next target, his predatory instincts seeking weakness, like a shark detecting blood. "You know what, class?" Derek announced, his voice carrying the false joviality of someone about to enjoy himself at another's expense. "I think we need to see some real-world application." "James," he pointed at the janitor with theatrical flourish, "how about you show these young fighters what an old-school street fighter looks like?" The invitation was loaded with condescension and racial undertones that made several students shift uncomfortably. Derek's assumption that a black janitor must be a street fighter revealed prejudices that went deeper than martial arts snobbery into genuine bigotry. His confidence that age and occupation automatically meant inferiority showed how completely he'd misjudged his target. James continued mopping without acknowledgement, his movements steady and methodical. Years of military discipline had taught him to ignore provocations that served no useful purpose, while his championship experience had shown him the value of controlling his own timing rather than responding to others' demands. "Come on, old man." Derek pressed, his voice rising as he sensed the opportunity slipping away. "Don't tell me you're scared. I promise I'll go easy on you. Maybe teach you a few things about real martial arts." The student's nervous laughter encouraged him to escalate further. "Or maybe you're too old and broken down for even a friendly match." The words "broken down" struck deeper than Derek could have known. James's medical discharge, his shattered championship dreams, and his current circumstances had all stemmed from injuries that remained painful reminders of everything he'd lost. But the insult also revealed Derek's complete ignorance of what he was actually confronting. James set down his mop with deliberate care, his movements economical and precise. When he turned to face Derek, his expression was neutral, but students who'd served in the military recognized something in his bearing that made them pay closer attention. "Son, I'm here to work, not play games." The refusal should have ended the confrontation, but Derek's ego couldn't accept being dismissed by someone he viewed as inferior. "Games. This is martial arts, old man. This is what we do here. Unless you're afraid to show these kids what you're made of." The challenge was designed to exploit masculine pride and social pressure tactics that worked on insecure students, but were powerless against someone who'd proven himself in genuine combat. James's response was quiet, but carried an edge that made Derek unconsciously step back. "I've got nothing to prove to you or anyone else in this room. I'm here to clean, you're here to teach. Let's both stick to what we know." But Derek's frustration at being thwarted was pushing him toward the kind of mistake that had defined his entire approach to martial arts. "What I know is that you're a janitor who's probably never been in a real fight in his life. What I know is that you're scared to step on the mat with a real martial artist." The racial and class-based insults were becoming impossible to ignore, and James felt something stirring that he'd kept buried for years. Not anger. Anger was an emotion he'd learned to control through military training and championship discipline. What he felt was the cold certainty of someone who'd been underestimated once too often. "Last chance, Derek," James said quietly, using the instructor's first name with pointed disrespect. "Walk away from this before you learn something you're not ready to know." The warning was both generous and prophetic, but Derek's arrogance had carried him too far to retreat. "The only thing I'm going to learn is how easy it is to embarrass someone who thinks mopping floors makes him tough." The atmosphere in the Iron Dragon gym shifted perceptibly as James Washington began removing his janitor's uniform shirt, revealing a physique that defied every assumption Derek had made about his opponent. The maintenance worker's frame was lean but densely muscled, marked by scars that spoke of violence far more serious than gym sparring. A tattoo on his left shoulder displayed the Ranger tab and wings that identified him as elite military, while older marks on his torso suggested a professional fighting career that predated his service. Derek's confidence flickered momentarily as he processed visual evidence that contradicted his preconceptions, but his ego quickly reasserted control. "Nice tattoos, old man. Let me guess you were some kind of army tough guy before you ended up pushing a mop for a living." The students gathered around the mat with the anticipation of spectators who sensed they were about to witness something unusual, though none could have predicted the magnitude of what was approaching. Several of the more experienced fighters noted James's movement patterns as he stretched the fluid mobility of someone whose body remembered high-level athletic training despite years away from competition. "Ground rules," Derek announced with theatrical authority, playing to his audience while establishing parameters he thought would ensure his victory. "Light contact, 3 5-minute rounds, standard MMA rules. I'll try not to hurt you too badly." His smirk was designed to humiliate James before the match even began. James's response was delivered with the calm professionalism of someone who'd competed at levels Derek couldn't imagine. "Your gym, your rules, but understand that once we start, I'm going to treat you like any other opponent. No special consideration for your feelings or your reputation." The warning should have given Derek pause, but his arrogance had reached the point where retreat was psychologically impossible. He'd built his identity on being the dominant force in his environment, and any crack in that facade threatened his entire self-concept. The first round began with Derek attempting to establish dominance through aggressive striking-throwing combinations that looked impressive but lacked the precision and power of genuine combat technique. His movements were flashy, but telegraphed, designed more for demonstration than effectiveness. James responded with subtle footwork that kept him out of range while allowing him to study his opponent's patterns. "Come on, old man," Derek taunted between exchanges. "Is running away the only fighting style they taught you in the Army?" His frustration was growing as James refused to engage in the kind of stationary exchange that would favor Derek's superior size and reach. But James was conducting a systematic analysis of Derek's capabilities, identifying weaknesses with the clinical precision of someone who'd studied thousands of opponents during his championship career. Derek's stance was too wide, his weight distribution poor, his guard positioning textbook, but impractical. More importantly, his conditioning was adequate for gym demonstrations, but insufficient for sustained high-intensity combat. The shift in momentum began subtly in the second round when James started returning fire with strikes that carried entirely different energy than Derek's athletic movements. Each punch and kick was delivered with perfect timing and placement, finding openings that shouldn't have existed but appeared whenever James chose to exploit them. The sound of impact was different too, sharper, more decisive, carrying the authority of genuine combat power. Derek's confidence began evaporating as he realized he was being systematically dismantled by someone who was operating on a completely different level. The easy victory he'd expected was becoming a masterclass in superior technique delivered by an opponent who seemed to anticipate his every move. The students' reaction was equally dramatic. Those with genuine martial arts experience recognized immediately that they were watching a professional-level fighter operating against an amateur regardless of belt ranks or gym hierarchy. The technical gap was so wide that Derek's supposed advantages in size, youth, and training became irrelevant. "Who the hell are you?" Derek gasped during the break between rounds, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine confusion and growing fear. James's dominance was so complete that Derek's worldview was collapsing in real time. James's response was delivered with the same quiet intensity that had characterized his entire approach. "I'm the janitor, the same person I was 10 minutes ago. The question is whether you're ready to learn something about respect." The third round was a demonstration rather than a competition. James moved with fluid precision that made Derek's techniques look clumsy by comparison, landing strikes at will while avoiding everything his opponent threw. But more than technical superiority, James displayed the kind of mental control that separated professional fighters from gym warriors, the ability to dominate without destroying, to prove superiority without inflicting unnecessary damage. Derek's breakdown was both physical and psychological. His conditioning failed first, his movements becoming sluggish and desperate as oxygen debt accumulated. His technique deteriorated next, his careful form collapsing under pressure into wild swinging that accomplished nothing except further exhaustion. Finally, his confidence shattered completely as he realized he was being toyed with by someone who could end the fight at any moment, but was choosing restraint. The conclusion came when James applied a submission hold so perfectly that Derek had no choice but to tap out or risk serious injury. The technique was applied with surgical precision, enough pressure to demonstrate complete control, but not enough to cause lasting damage. As Derek lay gasping on the mat, the silence in the gym was absolute, except for the sound of his labored breathing and the quiet dignity of James Washington collecting his janitor's shirt. The immediate aftermath of Derek's humiliation was a study in psychological collapse. The man who'd ruled the Iron Dragon gym through intimidation and false superiority lay gasping on the mat, his carefully constructed identity shattered by 3 rounds of brutal education. The submission hold that ended the match had been applied with such technical perfection that Derek understood, even through his exhaustion and shame, that he'd been completely outclassed by someone operating on an entirely different level. What the hell just happened? Derek wheezed, his voice carrying the bewilderment of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had been demolished. The question was directed at James, but it encompassed everything: how a janitor had dismantled a black belt instructor, how his techniques had been rendered useless, how his supposed expertise had been exposed as amateur posturing. James's response was delivered with the same quiet dignity that had characterized his entire performance. "You got schooled by someone you underestimated. Happens to the best of us." But there was no malice in his voice, no triumph at Derek's humiliation. Instead, there was the weary patience of someone who'd seen this pattern too many times: arrogance leading to overreach, prejudice creating blind spots, assumptions proving costly. The student's reaction was a mixture of shock, admiration, and uncomfortable recognition. Those who'd endured Derek's bullying were experiencing a complex emotional response: satisfaction at seeing their tormentor brought low, combined with awe at witnessing genuine martial arts mastery. But they were also grappling with the realization that they'd been learning from someone whose skills were far inferior to those of the man they dismissed as just the janitor. Derek's crisis deepened as the full implications of his defeat began to register. His reputation as the gym's dominant instructor was destroyed, his teaching methods exposed as inadequate, and his treatment of students revealed as compensating for his own insecurities rather than reflecting genuine expertise. The psychological impact was devastating for someone whose entire self-worth was tied to his perceived martial arts superiority. "You're military," Derek said finally, grasping for some explanation that would make sense of his defeat. "Special forces or something. That's not fair. That's not real martial arts." The attempt to diminish James's victory by categorizing it as something outside legitimate competition revealed how completely Derek had missed the point of what had just occurred. James's patience with Derek's excuses was wearing thin, and for the first time, edge crept into his voice. "Fair. You want to talk about fair? You've been bullying students for months, humiliating people who come here to learn, creating an environment where abuse gets mistaken for instruction. You called me out to embarrass me in front of your students because you thought I'd be an easy target. Now, you want to complain about fairness." The accusation forced Derek to confront not just his defeat, but his character, and the combination was overwhelming. Years of unchallenged arrogance had left him unprepared for genuine criticism, while his complete lack of introspection made it impossible to process feedback constructively. Instead of acknowledging his mistakes, he lashed out with the desperation of someone whose worldview was collapsing. "I don't care what you were before. Derek snarled, his humiliation transforming into rage. "Right now, you're just a janitor who got lucky. This doesn't change anything. I'm still the instructor here. I'm still the black belt, and you're still the help." The words were designed to reassert dominance through hierarchy and racial intimidation, but they revealed how little Derek had learned from his defeat. James's response was swift and decisive. Moving with the same fluid precision he'd displayed during their match, he closed the distance between them and applied a standing submission hold that left Derek completely helpless but unharmed. The technique was a masterpiece of control enough pressure to demonstrate total dominance while causing no lasting damage. "Listen carefully," James said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded troops in combat zones. "I've killed better men than you with my bare hands in places you couldn't find on a map. I've earned respect through blood and sacrifice while you've been playing dress-up in a gym. But I'm not here to hurt you, I'm here to work. So you're going to make a choice right now." The ultimatum that followed was delivered with clinical precision. You can accept that you got beaten by someone better than you and learn something from it, or you can keep running your mouth and discover what happens when I stop being patient. Your call. Derek's complete helplessness in the submission hold made his choice academic rather than brave, but it also provided him with a face-saving exit from a confrontation he couldn't win. Okay, he gasped. "I get it. You made your point." But as James released the hold and stepped back, both men understood that the real crisis wasn't the physical confrontation, it was the fundamental question of whether Derek possessed the character to learn from his humiliation or would simply find new ways to avoid accountability for his failures. The transformation began when gym owner Marcus Chen arrived the next morning to find his star instructor sitting alone on the mat, staring at the spot where his ego had been systematically dismantled by the night janitor. Derek's overnight vigil had been a journey through denial, anger, bargaining, and depression toward the faint possibility of acceptance. The man who'd built his identity on martial arts superiority had been forced to confront the reality that he was a fraud teaching techniques to students who deserved better. "Derek, what happened here last night?" Chen asked, noting the unusual arrangement of training equipment and the strange atmosphere that seemed to hang over the gym like the aftermath of a storm. Derek's response came slowly, each word extracted with visible effort. "I got schooled by someone I thought was beneath me. Turns out I've been teaching martial arts without really understanding what martial arts are supposed to be about." The confession was the first crack in the defensive structure Derek had built around his failures. But it was Chen's investigation that revealed the full scope of what had occurred. Security camera footage showed the complete mismatch between Derek's athletic techniques and James's professional-level combat skills, while audio captured the racial and class-based insults that had motivated the confrontation. Chen's reaction was swift and decisive. "Derek, you're suspended pending a full review of your teaching methods and conduct. I've been getting complaints about your approach for months, but I ignored them because you brought in students. Last night showed me what kind of environment we've been creating here." The suspension should have been devastating for Derek, but instead, it created space for the kind of self-reflection that his arrogance had previously made impossible. Stripped of his authority and forced to confront video evidence of his humiliation, he began the painful process of examining not just his techniques, but his character. Meanwhile, James continued his night shift routine as if nothing had changed, mopping floors and maintaining equipment with the same methodical precision that had characterized his military service. But word of the previous night's events was spreading through the martial arts community with viral intensity, creating buzz that reached far beyond the Iron Dragon gym. The revelation came when one of the students, a former Marine named Rodriguez, who'd recognized something familiar in James's bearing, conducted his own investigation into the janitor's background. What he discovered transformed understanding of who they'd been sharing their training space with for months. "Guys, you need to see this," Rodriguez announced during the next day's training session, his laptop displaying fight footage from James's championship years. "Our janitor is Lightning Washington, 5-time world champion, Hall of Fame inductee, arguably the greatest mixed martial artist of his generation." The students watched in stunned silence as video after video showed James destroying professional fighters with the same techniques they'd witnessed him use against Derek. But more revealing than his fighting skills was the grace and humility he'd displayed in victory, always helping up defeated opponents and showing the kind of sportsmanship that Derek had never demonstrated even against amateur students. Chen's response to this revelation was immediate and comprehensive. "I want to meet with Mr. Washington immediately. If he's willing, I want to offer him a teaching position here. Real teaching, not the bullying we've been allowing." The meeting that followed was held in Chen's office, with James still wearing his janitor's uniform, but carrying himself with the quiet dignity that had impressed everyone who'd witnessed his performance. Chen's offer was generous head instructor position, competitive salary, complete authority over training methods and gym culture. "Mr. Washington, I owe you an apology for allowing the kind of environment that led to last night's confrontation. I also owe you an opportunity to do what you're clearly meant to do: teach real martial arts to people who need real instruction." James's response was characteristically thoughtful. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Chen, but I need to consider whether I'm ready to return to that world. I've been out of teaching for years, and I have personal responsibilities that come first." The negotiation that followed addressed James's concerns while recognizing his unique value. Chen offered flexible scheduling that would accommodate James's family obligations, health insurance that would cover his wife's medical treatments, and the kind of respect and authority that his credentials clearly warranted. But the real breakthrough came when Derek requested a private meeting with James, approaching the man he'd insulted and underestimated with genuine humility for the first time in his adult life. "I want to apologize," Derek said simply, "not just for last night, but for everything. The way I've been teaching, the way I've been treating students, the assumptions I made about you based on your job and your race. I was wrong about everything." James's response was generous but realistic. "Apologies are good, Derek, but they don't mean anything unless they're followed by real change. The question is whether you're willing to start over, learn proper techniques, and treat students with the respect they deserve." The transformation that followed was gradual but genuine. Derek accepted a demotion to assistant instructor under James's supervision, beginning his martial arts education from scratch, with the humility of someone who learned the cost of arrogance. His progress was slow but steady, marked more by improved character than advanced techniques. James's return to teaching was a revelation for everyone involved. His classes were technically sophisticated but psychologically supportive, challenging students to excel while building their confidence rather than destroying it. His military experience informed his understanding of discipline, while his championship background provided technical knowledge that elevated everyone's skills. The gym's culture transformed completely under James's leadership. The atmosphere of intimidation and hierarchy was replaced by one of mutual respect and genuine learning. Students who'd been driven away by Derek's methods returned, while new members were attracted by word-of-mouth reports about the world-class instruction now available at Iron Dragon. 6 months later, the gym hosted a demonstration for local martial arts schools, with James showcasing techniques and philosophy that had made him a champion. Derek assisted in the demonstration, his role humble but essential. His transformation from bully to student complete and inspiring. The event's highlight came when James addressed the assembled students and instructors about the true purpose of martial arts training. Fighting skills are just tools. He explained, his voice carrying the authority of someone who tested those tools in the ultimate arena. What matters is the character of the person using them. Strength without honor is just violence. Technique without respect is just showing off. The real test of a martial artist isn't what they can do to others, it's what they choose not to do. Derek's public acknowledgement of James's impact was perhaps the most powerful moment of the demonstration. "Mr. Washington didn't just teach me better techniques," he said to the assembled crowd. "He taught me what it means to be a teacher, a student, and a human being worthy of respect." The standing ovation that followed was directed at both men, James for his technical mastery and moral leadership, Derek for his courage in acknowledging his failures and committing to genuine change. The applause represented recognition that the most important victories in martial arts aren't won on competition mats, but in the daily choice to treat others with dignity and respect. As the demonstration ended and the crowds dispersed, James and Derek worked together to clean up the gym, their partnership a living symbol of how authentic strength can transform enemies into allies, and how genuine teaching can change lives in ways that extend far beyond physical techniques. The transformation of Iron Dragon MMA became a model for martial arts instruction throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. James Washington's teaching methods, combining technical excellence with character development, attracted attention from martial arts publications, military training programs, and educational institutions seeking to understand how competitive skills could be taught alongside personal growth and mutual respect. The immediate consequences were transformative for everyone involved. Derek's journey from arrogant bully to humble student became a powerful example of how genuine mentorship could facilitate personal growth, even in adults whose characters seemed permanently formed. His willingness to acknowledge his failures and commit to improvement inspired other instructors throughout the martial arts community to examine their own teaching methods and motivations. James's return to prominence in the martial arts world was gradual but significant. His classes at Iron Dragon became legendary for their technical sophistication and supportive atmosphere, attracting students from across the Southwest who sought authentic instruction from a proven champion. His teaching philosophy, emphasizing character development alongside technical skill, influenced a generation of martial artists who understood that true strength required wisdom and restraint. The military connection that James's background provided became valuable for both the gym and the broader veteran community. Iron Dragon developed specialized programs for veterans dealing with PTSD, using martial arts training as therapy for service members struggling with civilian transition. James's ability to relate to military culture while teaching practical skills created healing opportunities that traditional therapy couldn't provide. The economic impact was equally significant. Under James's leadership, Iron Dragon's enrollment tripled, while the quality of instruction attracted serious students willing to pay premium rates for authentic training. The gym's reputation spread through social media and word-of-mouth marketing, with video of Derek's humiliation and transformation becoming viral content that demonstrated the difference between fake martial arts and genuine expertise. Derek's personal transformation continued long after his initial humiliation. His experience of being broken down and rebuilt under James's mentorship led him to pursue advanced training in sports psychology and conflict resolution. He eventually became a specialist in helping other instructors overcome the ego-driven teaching methods that had characterized his own early career. The broader cultural impact extended beyond martial arts to influence discussions about respect, humility, and the danger of assumptions based on occupation, race, or age. James's story became a powerful example of how excellence could exist in unexpected places, while Derek's transformation showed that even deeply flawed individuals could change when confronted with superior examples of character and skill. The veteran advocacy that grew from James's visibility helped change how society viewed military service members transitioning to civilian life. His example demonstrated that veterans possessed skills and leadership qualities that could benefit civilian communities when properly recognized and utilized. Corporate diversity programs began actively recruiting veterans, while educational institutions developed specialized programs to help service members translate their military experience into civilian success. The universal message resonated across cultures and generations. True strength comes from character, rather than titles. Respect must be earned through actions, rather than demanded through position. And the most powerful teaching often comes from those who faced genuine adversity with dignity and grace.